A few days ago, I walked by the lopsided calendar in the hallway on my way to the kitchen and realized it was already mid-August. For the rest of the day, I heard a faint, relentless tick, tick, tick in the back of my mind. This morning, I desperately wanted to stay in bed. The sun's rays banged on the window, demanding to be let in as the air conditioner roared at them to go away. I buried my head into the pillow to drown out the fan, which normally hummed silently as it spun on the ceiling, but now ticked loudly with every turn. Many of the perennial plants in the garden were barely hanging on, silently screaming as the sun's rays blistered their leaves. The annuals, on the other hand, were colorless, brittle skeletons of the once lush greenery that adorned Serendipity. The ticking grew more insistent, and I knew the only way to silence it was to go outside and clean. I'd mourned the short-lived annuals, but it was time to move on. It was time to tame the garden and start over. There was no plan or list, just an uncomfortable feeling that I was running out of time. Anyways, okay, let's start cleaning up now. I'm dreading this so bad right now. You know what I should invest in? A wood chipper. I have a mulcher, but the mulcher is more so for leaves, and I need something that can shred up all of these grapevines, like harder things, you know? And then I could probably just use that for mulch. That would be amazing. These are all tomatoes right here. I got a really nice production, and they were really starting to pump out fruit when another heat wave came through and just scorched the whole plant. This trellis is made out of remesh panels. Last year they fell over because I was holding them up with wood, but then I switched the wood out for T-posts, and they are so sturdy. They've held up massive tomato plants. At one point this was super heavy, loaded with fruit, and the trellis was perfectly intact. In the fall, I don't know whether I want to plant tomatoes here again though. I love the way it looks. I'm torn. I mean, I have 4 of these, so I can choose. I can make one a tomato trellis, make another one for melons, one for beans. But to be honest with you, in the next few years, I don't know if I'm going to keep planting as many indeterminates, or at least as many slicers as I did this year, unless they perform really good in the fall, because otherwise I feel like they take up a lot of space. I mean, this whole portion of the trellis was filled with tomato vines or tomato branches, but there wasn't enough fruit to compensate for the amount of space that they took up. One thing I will say though, the shade cloth definitely helped to keep these alive for much longer than they would have, because they were still producing into last month, and last year by like May they were out. The tomatoes were completely scorched, so the shade cloth definitely helped. It's just that the summer this year was just ridiculous. Even my heat-loving plants were having trouble staying alive. I planted, this makes me feel so sad, I even planted Roselle hibiscus. If you guys have ever grown Roselle or sorrel, it loves the heat. It thrives in the heat. And I planted some in my front yard in the ground, and I was so excited because I was like, hopefully this means that the roots will be more insulated and I'll get bigger plants and like double the harvest, because I'll have some in the garden and I'll have some in my front yard. They are scorched. It made me feel so sad. So that's just how, because it's been so hot here in the low desert, that nothing wants to stay alive out here. This was another tomato plant, but it also got intertwined with an Armenian cucumber, and everything was so messy that I accidentally chopped the bottom of the Armenian cucumber, so now the whole trellis is going to be completely bare. August is the perfect time to direct sow more vining crops like pole beans, pumpkins, winter squash, summer squash, and cucumbers. These crops can be grown vertically and would look beautiful on these DIY birdcage trellises in addition to being productive. I personally love rattlesnake pole beans because their pattern is striking and they're a very productive variety. I also enjoy planting long beans that will dangle from the trellises, like the Oriental yard long bean and asparagus beans. They can be added to any dish and harvesting them is just so satisfying. My go-to vining squash is the Zucchino rampicante or tromboncino squash because it's shaped like a swan and it can be eaten green as a summer squash or allowed to ripen on the vine and stored as a winter squash. The white scallop squash doesn't vine, but it's a wonderful bush variety that produces adorable little fruit which remind me of pale garden jellyfish. I harvest them young and my family loves them because they are tender and hold their shape well during cooking. Usually, I stick to Armenian cucumbers as I haven't had much luck with others. However, I don't think the cucumbers themselves are the problem. It's my lack of pollination to help the vines set fruit. That's something I need to work on, is adding more flowers to invite more pollinators into serendipity. And I'll keep that in mind when I'm planting the fall vegetable garden. I'm gonna try and hurry up cleaning up because my skin is starting to get really itchy from all the leaves sticking to it. I might also move my citrus tree because I opened up the top enough to where it's gonna get like full sun, so I might as well put it in its final location so it can get accustomed to it if I have enough time and energy. I'm gonna move this first because every time I keep walking by, I feel like I'm so close to walking into it, and this tree has a lot of thorns. So if I walk into it, I'm gonna get all scratched up like last time. So I might as well just get it over with. All right. I'd be lying if I said I thought this through. When I first set out to save this 10-year-old sweet lime tree, I wasn't sure what I was doing, and honestly, I still don't. I've been watching this tree closely, making mental notes of any changes I notice. Some days there are none, but other days the tree suddenly looks so different. Its canopy has begun to fill out and small suckers constantly sprout from the bottom trunks. The tree itself is a bit odd in its growth habits, with wonky branches appearing from time to time. Maybe it's because it's an old tree, or maybe rootstocks just grow really weird. I'm almost certain the whole thing is a rootstock that has overtaken the original fruit tree. Yet it's fighting to stay alive, and I don't have the heart to rob it of that fighting chance. So why am I moving it now? Well, it's over 100 degrees outside and I am irritated. My t-shirt is soaked with sweat and covered in hundreds of dry, itchy pieces of leaves. I can even feel them in my hair. Sweat beads from every pore on my body, and my eyes sting from the mix of sweat and sunscreen. I've chopped down mile-long grapevines and entered the seeing red phase. Frankly, I'm rage cleaning the garden, and the tree blocks the main path. If I want to make any real progress in the garden, the tree must be moved, and I must do it now before the sun melts away the last bit of sanity left in me. My patience is dwindling with every ticking second I work outside, but I justify it by telling myself that the tree's chances of survival are the same in the orchard and underneath Arch Rose Claire, now that there is no real microclimate left without the grapevines. I do believe this to be true, but I still can't help but wonder if I'm making a huge mistake. Oh my god, I can walk through again. Oh, I forget how much I miss this. It's open. I don't even know if I even want to put anything here anymore because I just love the way this feels. The heat might be getting to me, but I couldn't stop now. The relentless ticking of the clock was raising its voice, reminding me that time was running out. The sweet lime tree didn't want to go. Arch Rose Claire had become more than just a home. Early mornings were its favorite. The sun would peek through the grape leaves, lighting the tunnel in an emerald hue. It lost track of the birds that stopped by to chatter, but enjoyed each one's company all the same. Their stories recounted adventures in enchanted orchards, often mentioning Citrus Lane and Aurora Boulevard, among others. Though these places sounded wonderful, the sweet lime tree didn't care to visit them. No matter how much beauty filled a space, it could never compare to Arch Rose Claire. Now, it understood why the birds went silent when footsteps approached. The same footsteps it heard the night it was ripped from its home. The gardener's footsteps. The footsteps that brought it to Arch Rose Claire were now ripping it from its beloved tunnel. The decade-old tree screamed silently, clinging to nearby pieces of the home it had grown to love. Its branches stung as they whipped against the trellises. It stretched its leaves out in one final, silent goodbye as it passed through the arbor of jasmine.